When I recall the day of my high school graduation, the first thing that surfaces isn't pride or excitement, but the low tide of humiliation slapping cold against my feet. The gymnasium hummed with the electric restlessness of hundreds. Our robes rustled like wings. My name had been called Mitsuko Yamamoto, and my heart thudded as I stepped up, clutching my speech. The principal, all formal polite angles, gestured to the microphone. I saw my parents in the crowd. My mother's neatly folded hands, my father's tight jaw. Behind them, neighbors I'd known since childhood leaned forward. Curiosity piqued for reasons I would soon understand. I drew in a breath. My dream, I began, voice a-quiver, is to become a classical pianist, and the laughter trembled at the fringes, spreading like a stain. It started as a throat clearing, then a whispered ripple. Mrs. Sato, my uncle's wife, covered her mouth but failed to mask her smirk. A snort came from someone near the teacher's table. I saw Junpei, my cousin, my one-time partner in mischief, roll his eyes. Across the gym, Mrs. Ishikawa, whose eldest son had made it to Tokyo University, nudged the woman beside her. The microphone whined, sharp and petulant. My speech shrank, and I pressed on, but the principal placed a light hand on my shoulder. "That's enough, Mitsuko-chan," he murmured, gently but firm. I stepped aside. Heat flaring up the back of my neck. The applause was polite, perfunctory. When I met my mother's eyes, her lips pressed flatter than paper. My father looked away first. Later at home, my aunts exchanged looks over pickled plums and rice. "Such a fanciful child," one whispered. "Those foreign concertos nobody hears in Kotoku. Why not a piano teacher, maybe? But—" She let the sentence dangle like laundry in the rain. My father's hand landed heavy on my shoulder. "Your mind is bright enough. Don't waste it chasing wind." I started to wake at dawn, fingers trailing over the cracked keys of our upright. My teacher, Ito-sensei, had hands that smelled faintly of jasmine and old wood. She'd taught me since childhood. Even she went silent when I confessed my dream, nodding once, eyes too careful to meet mine. "You will never belong in their world, Mitsuko," she cautioned. "But if you must try, do so without expecting kindness." Each day, the old resentments gathered around me. Small, mean, ordinary things. My cousin Junpei, who now wore the badge of a Tokyo salaryman, joked, "Did you hear? Mitsuko's gonna be the next Mozart. Can you imagine her in a tailcoat?" The neighbors asked when I would take a real job. My mother made me promise to apply to backup colleges, just in case. Only Ito-sensei, who once played Chopin at Tokyo Bunka Kaikan and lost her place to a nervous tremor, offered me hushed encouragement. I left for Tokyo from our narrow, gray suburb with 2 suitcases, one stuffed with sheet music and cheap dresses, the other with hope brown as oversteeped tea. My dormitory was hot and sour with instant ramen. Upstairs, my roommate Hina practiced kabuki lines, the syllables heavy as drums through the paper walls. On early mornings, I practiced in the music building, numbing loneliness with exercises and variations. My hands grew strong. Veins corded from scales hammered out with purpose. It was in those echoing, empty halls that I faced myself most honestly, sometimes staring at my reflection, hunched by the grand piano. Always the question, who am I doing this for? My dead grandmother, who hummed Clair de Lune while making sweet pickles? The girl who stood at the microphone, laughed off the stage? For a year, recognition came only as indifference, teachers clicking pens, classmates sliding glances aside. The city itself humming past on the Yamanote line. My stipend was a joke, and I played weddings to make rent. At one embarrassing post-ceremony party, the bride's uncle tipped me with a cheap umbrella. Rejection became ritual. audition after audition ending in gentle practice disappointment, small nods, polite thank yous, never invitations to return. "You have technique, but not enough color," said one judge, tapping her teeth. "You are too quiet for big halls," her colleague added. Even as I recalled the echo of my silent high school gym, at night I lay on my futon, wrists aching, the city's neon halo throbbing through my blinds. I thought of quitting every other day. I wrote letters home that skirted the truth. When I visited during New Year, my mother would slide me an envelope. A little help, her mouth unsmiling. My father only said, "Gambare." Years slipped past. Hina moved out. I shared rooms with others. A Chinese violinist who studied by flashlight, an aspiring novelist who smoked too much and wept at midnight. One autumn, Ito-sensei called. Her voice was fainter, but excitement threaded through. "I entered your name in the Matsumoto Concerto competition," she said. "They want to hear new talent. Play your best, Mitsuko." I nearly declined. I told her I was too tired, that I'd failed too often. But something in her proud, trembling voice, a loner's tenacity, a secret hope pulled me back to myself. And maybe I owed more to little Mitsuko, who had once dared speak aloud. The competition hall was smaller than I'd imagined. Pew-like chairs, velvet worn to satin. I watched contestants with hands much larger than mine, cellists with sharp shoulders, piano prodigies tapping wrists, all younger. There was no grandeur, just a faint tension in the air, the sameness of struggle. When my turn came, I wiped nervous palms on my skirt. The old Steinway's keys were smooth, missing their friction. I chose Debussy not for show, but because its silvery sadness matched the faint rain outside, and my own sense of being in between. Music has always been my truest confession. In that moment, I played not for the judges, but for the girl at the microphone, for Ito-sensei's careful pride, and for the certainty that even if no one cheered, I could not stop. I played until the room faded, and when I finished, my fingers trembled, but my chest felt oddly clear. There was no applause, just polite nods. I took the train home, expecting nothing. A week later, an email. Finalist. Then, in December, word, grand prize, with a small stipend to study in Vienna. My first real check arrived in pale blue yen, folding gently in my hands. I would go abroad, as I had dreamed, not for stardom, but because it was the next possible step. I stood at the train window as dawn broke, the city's towers blurred by fog, and in the reflection, saw myself neither triumphant nor defeated, but simply moving forward. In Vienna, the air smelled of espresso and snow. I played for audiences that understood even my mistakes. My Japanese hesitations, my soft touch, my tiny hands there. These became unique rather than flaws. It was never easy. Other pianists, sharper and grander, returned home to magazine covers. I played small recitals, taught schoolchildren to pluck out Bach. I missed the steam of my mother's miso soup, Ito-sensei's jasmine tea. But slowly, quietly, my name moved from margins to programs, my photo appearing in small newspapers. I made enough to hold my head higher. Years passed in this way, quiet persistence, anonymous advancement. Each spring, I sent money home, notes more honest than before. "Things are not easy, but I can make it," I wrote. The return was never triumphant, never cinematic. One August, after a performance at Suntory Hall, my agent, a brusque Australian named Kathleen, booked a Tokyo tour. 4 cities culminating at home. The Kotoku Community Center, familiar, unassuming. The entryway still echoed with the slap of sandals, the cool quiet before dawn. The piano was newer, a black glossy kawaii, but the green velvet curtains hung unchanged. I faced the invitation with dread. The woman who called, Mrs. Ishikawa, sounded surprised. "You're really back?" On stage this time, ne? Would you like to give a talk after the concert, Mitsuko-chan? She asked pointedly. I arrived backstage to find the chairs filling. My parents sat in the second row, my mother's scarf prim as ever, my father's hair gray around the temples. A sea of familiar faces. Junpei, my cousin,